There's a man in Ohio worth $11 million. He drives a 2009 Honda Civic. The seats are cracked. The check engine light has been on for 3 years. He buys his shirts from the same discount rack he's shopped since 1994. His neighbors think he's a retired accountant living on a pension. He's not poor, and he's not pretending to be modest. He has simply spent 40 years doing something almost nobody talks about, something that has nothing to do with stock tips, side hustles, or crypto, and everything to do with a kind of discipline that looks, from the outside, like nothing at all. This is the part nobody puts in a thumbnail. Most of the people who actually get rich in this country don't look rich. They don't act rich. They don't post rich. The wealthiest segment of what we call the middle class has been quietly running the same playbook for decades. And the strange thing is, it's not a secret. It's published. It's studied. It's sitting in plain sight in research most people have simply never opened. So why does almost nobody follow it? That's the real question here. And the answer is going to make you a little uncomfortable, because it's not really about money. It's about what money does to your ego the moment you have a little bit of it. Let's set the scene. Right now, the gap between how rich people perform wealth and how they actually build it has never been wider. Social media runs on a simple transaction. You watch someone unbox a designer bag, lease a supercar, fly private to some coastline, and your brain quietly files that away as evidence. Evidence of what wealth looks like. Evidence of the finish line. Except most of what you're watching isn't wealth. It's turnover. A lot of those bags are rented. A lot of those cars are leased on thin margins. A lot of those flights are charter splits, paid for by sponsorship deals that vanish the moment the algorithm moves on. Meanwhile, the actual wealthy, the ones with 7, 8, 9 figures sitting quietly in index funds and unglamorous real estate, are almost invisible. Economists draw a distinction here that matters more than people realize. High income and high net worth are not the same population, and the overlap between them is smaller than you'd assume. You can earn $400,000 a year and have a negative net worth. It happens constantly. Doctors do it. Lawyers do it. Athletes do it spectacularly on camera in documentaries made after the money is already gone. And you can earn $65,000 a year, drive that crackseat Civic, and die with $11 million in the bank. This isn't a coincidence. It's a mechanism. And once you see the mechanism, you can't unsee it. So let's open it up. How does this actually work? Strip away the jargon, and stealth wealth comes down to 4 behaviors, repeated for a long time without interruption. The first is invisible saving. Not budgeting. Not depriving yourself of coffee. Something colder than that. Paying yourself first before your lifestyle ever sees the money. Most people get paid, spend on whatever feels urgent and deserved, and save whatever's left. That leftover is usually close to nothing, because spending tends to expand to meet whatever cash is available. There's a name for this: lifestyle creep. Give someone a raise, and within a year their spending has usually absorbed most of it. Stealth wealth flips the order. The saving happens first automatically before the spending brain ever gets a vote. 10%, 15%, sometimes more, diverted the moment it lands into a retirement account, an index fund, somewhere you've trained yourself not to check. It sounds almost too simple to matter. It's the financial equivalent of eating your vegetables. The second behavior is time. Not effort, time. Picture 2 investors. One starts at 25, the other at 35. Same contributions, same average return. By 65, the 25-year-old usually ends up with roughly double what the other one has, sometimes more. That gap isn't talent. It's compounding interest earning interest on a loop that doesn't care how smart you are. It only cares how long you let it run. That should feel a little unfair because it is. A 10-year head start can outweigh almost everything you do afterward. A mediocre investor who starts early can beat a brilliant one who starts late. Nobody builds a course around be early and be boring, because boring doesn't sell. The third behavior is the real hinge point, keeping fixed costs low while income rises. Most people, the moment they get a raise, upgrade the apartment, the car, the vacations. Each upgrade becomes the new floor, and floors are nearly impossible to lower once you've raised them. Stealth wealth households do something almost rebellious by comparison. They let income climb and let lifestyle lag behind it on purpose for years. The gap between earning and spending doesn't shrink as they get richer. It widens. That widening gap is where the fortune actually lives, not in some clever trade, but in the silence between income and spending, compounding year after year. The fourth behavior is patience with boring assets. Index funds, paid-off rentals, employer retirement matches. None of it trends because none of it has a dramatic before and after. There's no 5,000 to $500,000 story here. It's closer to watching a tree grow. Nothing happens for a long time and then, after 15 or 20 years, everything happens at once. Now here's the uncomfortable math because the system works, but it isn't magic, and it isn't equally available to everyone. Pretending otherwise is where most finance content quietly lies to you. The math depends almost entirely on margin, the distance between what you earn and what you need to survive. If your income barely covers rent, food, and transportation, there's no margin to divert into compounding. 08. The mechanism simply doesn't activate. You could be the most disciplined person alive and the math still won't run, because there's nothing left to multiply. That's the part stealth wealth content tends to skip. The man in the cracked Civic almost certainly started with some baseline of stability. Steady income, no catastrophic debt, no medical crisis draining the account at 30. Remove that stability and the same habits tell a much harder story. So the real first ingredient isn't discipline. It's margin. Discipline is what you do with margin once you have it. Without it, discipline just means going without, with nothing to show for it later. And time isn't distributed evenly either. A 25-year-old with margin has decades for compounding to work its quiet arithmetic. A 45-year-old discovering all this for the first time has a fraction of that runway. Same habits, smaller results, sometimes dramatically smaller. Compounding rewards the people who needed the reward least urgently, and it punishes urgency. The person who needs the money soonest gets the least benefit from the one strategy supposedly built to provide it. That's not a flaw. That's the design. It was never built to be fair. It was built to reward time, and time is the one resource nobody can buy back at any price. Here's the part that gets almost no airtime. Stealth wealth has a hidden cost, and it isn't financial. Ask anyone who's actually lived this way for 20 years and a strange theme comes up. Not regret about the money worked. The strange part is what they gave up to let it work. Vacations skipped. Reunions missed. A car that embarrassed their kids in a school parking lot. Years spent looking by every visible measure, like they were barely getting by, while a number on a screen quietly climbed past what most people will ever see in a lifetime. There's a particular irony in this. The whole point of money is supposedly to buy freedom and experience. Stealth wealth, taken to its logical extreme, often means deferring almost all experience in exchange for a number you mostly don't touch. Some of these people retire at 55 with 8 figures and discover, almost on schedule, that they've also lost the habit of spending. The frugality that built the fortune doesn't switch off just because the goal was met. A few of them sit on enormous piles of money and still feel a flicker of guilt buying a coffee that costs $6. The system worked exactly as designed, and somehow that's the part nobody warns you about. Now contrast that against the version of wealth most people are actually chasing, the version performed online. That version promises the opposite trade. Spend now, enjoy now, let the metrics prove you've already arrived. The uncomfortable truth is that most of that performed wealth is financed, not earned. Leases, credit lines, sponsorship income that depends entirely on staying relevant in a feed that has no loyalty to anyone. It's a strategy with a shelf life, and the shelf life is shorter than almost anyone watching realizes, because the people performing it have every incentive to hide the expiration date. So you end up with two groups walking past each other. One looks rich and is quietly drowning in liabilities. The other looks ordinary and is sitting on a fortune they may never fully enjoy. Neither group is lying exactly. They're just optimizing for two completely different audiences, one for a feed, one for a future self they may not fully recognize when they get there. Which raises the bigger question, the one underneath all of this. If the system rewards starting early and most people don't have meaningful margin until their 30s or later, after rent, after debt, after the years it takes to even stabilize, then the habits aren't really the bottleneck. Access to time is. And access to time isn't something you can hack with a morning routine or a budgeting app. It's shaped by where you were born, what you inherited or didn't, what emergencies hit you and when, and how much margin existed before you ever had a say in any of it. That doesn't make the habits worthless. The 4 behaviors are real and they work exactly as described for the people who can actually run them. But there's a quiet dishonesty in selling them as a universal formula, as if $11 million is simply what's left over after enough self-control, available equally to everyone who tries hard enough. So maybe the real question isn't whether stealth wealth works. Clearly does. The real question is what we're actually measuring when we admire it, discipline, or the decades of stability that made discipline affordable in the first place. And whether anyone quietly running this playbook right now, this year, has stopped long enough to ask what they're actually buying with all that deferred time. Because the money eventually comes due. The question is whether the years do too.